Welcome to the Deep Into Movies podcast. My name is Stephen T. Hanley. I'm the founder and lead curator of Deep Into Movies. We're a pop-up cinema screening important contemporary cinema and overlooked gems across London. Up front, I need to thank Joshua Eustace of Telephone Tel Aviv and Second Woman. He made our incredible music. Our engineer is Ewan Henselwood, both dear friends and ridiculously talented people. So thank you both. For our first podcast, I spoke to the comedian, writer, and filmmaker Stewart Lee. Stewart joined me to talk about his new documentary King Rocker, which he made with director Michael Cumming. It investigates how Prefects and Nightingales frontman Robert Lloyd has survived under the radar for more than 4 decades. Robert is a great punk outsider. We love this documentary. Some of it was shot at the beloved Moth Club in Hackney, where I started screenings 5 years ago. It's a story of making art, getting kicked around, feeling like you want to give up, and keep on going. It's available to watch for free on Sky Arts, Now TV, and on demand. Here's our conversation. Let's get into it. How did the film come about? I know you knew Robert anyway, but he pitched you to make a film about his life.
Well, I think he asked Phil Jupiters first and he wouldn't do it. And to be fair, about 10 years ago, we were in the Yorkshire Grey, which is a nice pub in Fitzrovia, north of Oxford Street, where George Orwell used to drink, and where I was once on a bill. There's a 50-seater room upstairs, and I was on a bill that was me, Peter Kay, Rob Newman, Stephen Merchant, and Ricky Gervais was in the audience. And it was sort of £2, you know. It's really funny to think of that. Anyway, anyway, Rob said, "Do you think that you could make a film, a documentary about the Nightingales, like the Anvil film, a sort of comedy film?" And I thought about it. I thought, well, you probably could, but you'd want it to not to make a better case for them than that makes for Anvil, really, because they're a different sort of group. And also, no one will fund it, obviously. You know, I can't get things that I think are commercial ideas done. So no one will pay for it. It's a bit like Jerry Springer the Opera. It's kind of thing people just think, well, that's insane. And then when it's a hit, everyone goes, oh, of course it would have been all along, you know. But this has been like that. No one would have done it. After a few years of asking around, I did get to the point where the head of comedy on Radio 4 said I could do a sort of half-hour radio documentary about it. And I just thought, you know, it's not worth it, really, because it would take so much work. You might as well do it like what you want. But I just didn't know how to start, really, doing it myself. And then about 3 years ago, I was talking to Michael Cumming, a director who I knew anyway, because he'd done the pilot of Comedy Vehicle, and then he went off to do Toast instead, because that came in. But it turned out he was a massive Nightingales fan, and I said, well, do you want to make a film about them? And he went, all right. And we knew we'd have to do it ourselves. We would make it and see what happened. But I'd just been helping out in a little bit on a film about Shirley Collins, the folk singer, which Fire Records in the end produced. And I liked the bloke from there, James, and I went to talk to him about it, and he said, well, he'd help, but obviously there was no budget, so we did all the research and everything and got ourselves to places. We did a bit of crowdfunding, that's all the names at the end. And we did 3 gigs, me and Michael, where he showed his documentary about Brasseye that he worked on, and I did Work in Progress. We did them at Earth in Dalston, about a 700-seater. And we used the money from that to pay a crew for about 12 days, 10 days, crew of about 3 people, sound, and 2 cameras. Michael did all the editing in his shed, which he had never done before. We finished it in about February last year, just before lockdown, and the idea was we were going to tour it around cinemas and do little talks and stuff, and then that went down. And luckily, everyone we approached to try and sell it to as broadcasters wasn't interested, but Sky Arts were, and we're not quite in profit yet, but we've eaten up a lot of our debt, and we made it for less than someone gets paid for appearing on Taskmaster, to put it in perspective. And it's been a big hit, and people seem like it got, 200,000 on Sky Arts, which is more than a lot of BBC Four shows get, so it's brilliant. And it's obviously going to have a further life. And I know it's been really good for the Nightingales, which at the end of the day was what it was all about. They've gone from getting sort of 500 streams a week to 8,000, which means they'll earn 10p from that. But in terms of people coming to shows and stuff, I think it'll make a big difference to them. It's good to have a record of them. A document of them. The film, because there was only 2 of us really involved in it and no executives, the film was what we wanted it to be. That's why it's quirky and fun in a way that television documentaries normally aren't. Neither of us particularly like rockumentaries, so we didn't want to make one. Michael really likes 70s and 80s arena documentaries, particularly Michael Wall, that were quite quirky and fun. And I was thinking of things like Andrew Cotting's films, where he makes a sort of a documentary, but it's not necessarily true, and things like that. So it just came together really well, and everyone involved with the group and the group themselves were so nice that I really missed them when we'd finished working on it, because I had a off-the-peg extended network of friends for a couple of months. That was a long answer, but I've been thinking about it all month, so what's your next question?
I was going to say, I love music documentaries, especially on outsiders, underdogs, and misfits. They always seem to make the best subject. But I had in my notes, just from we screen movies all the time, and anytime I'm talking to documentary filmmakers, like I know Jeff, who made the Devil and Daniel Johnston documentary.
Right, I haven't seen that.
You haven't seen that?
No,
that seems very you.
I noticed you've got the T-shirt. But
no, this is Tortoise.
Oh yeah, it is. It looks like that baby one.
Yeah.
When he's
And Being Frank documentary.
I haven't seen that either. Although weirdly, I was involved in a fundraising for the statue. I was involved in a fundraising for the statue. Yeah, I've seen lots of them, but I haven't seen those.
The Jandek documentary.
I haven't seen that. Although I've just received a signed Jandek CD via a strange course of events, but he signs it as Corwood Industries. He won't sign his name, which I think is fantastic. But no, I've not seen that one.
All these documentaries that I mentioned when I've spoken to the directors, they're all just labors of love. They've always taken 5 to 10 years to make. As you mentioned, no funding.
Yeah.
Clearing licenses, different
the licenses
labels.
Is the worst part. That was the majority of the budget, was clearing things, and there was one thing we had to spend a lot on, because you couldn't really tell the story of them without showing some footage of the hit of Rocking with Rita. The video has become an asset of some big company. It was just impossible, and the razzmatazz footage was 4 times more expensive than anything else, but it is really good. It really tells a story. In a way, we were lucky, because there isn't very much footage of the Nightingales. There's maybe 4 bits of footage of the band playing, of which we used 3. There's 2 bits of footage. There's 3 bits of footage of Rob Solo, of which we used 2, and there's 1 that I'd love to have seen that's just missing. And then all the stuff from since they've reformed, we had access to that because they've done everything themselves. But yeah, the archive was really difficult. Yeah, it's all owned by Getty now. Getty is sort of buying everything, and so it was it was difficult, but it was easier in a way because no one was thinking, "Oh, I hope my favourite bit of Nightingale's footage is on it," because there isn't any.
I really liked your approach to the film. You're almost deconstructing the music documentary. Like there's the scene where over a curry where you say to Robert, can you just talk about this, but say it as if you haven't been prompted to do
Yeah.
so?
Well, I mean, I always had half an eye on that as Michael was filming it, on ways to sort of explode the machine of it. It's not a new idea. I mean, you can find things from the Middle Ages of people doing that, being postmodern. But I don't think it's quite like you know more about it than me. But I don't think it's been done in a rockumentary. And obviously, Michael helped to develop the visual grammar of Brass Eye, which has a very critical relationship with the language of documentaries and news coverage and arts coverage. So he was always on the lookout for things like that. And also, Rob has a sense of humour where he'd understand what was being done. And it was really nice working with someone who could see jokes being set up and would roll with them. Because my last experience of that kind of thing was being on panel shows in the mid-noughties. I did Have I Got News for You, which wasn't too bad, but I also did Buzzcocks and the Jimmy Carr one, which was terrible because you start to try and set something up for the good of the group, and then you're kind of stamped on because everyone's trying to be the person that gets the laugh, and they've normally got stuff they've written with their writers before that they need to land. And it was nice to be in a humour generating situation that was just like being with your friends, where unless you've got really horrible friends, no one's trying to win the room,
Yeah.
So he was really good like that. I mean, a funny bit is when we're looking for the location of Barbarella's, and all these documentaries have people standing outside some place, don't they, and going, "This used to be whatever."
Yeah, you repeat
CBGB's,
the scene like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, well, we knew where it was, but Rob was a bit tired and he just didn't really want to walk there. And he said everywhere looks the same anyway. So we just sort of did it over and over again in the same street in different places. But he sort of built it. Everyone was funnier than the last one. It was great.
How is it working with Robert? Because he's an unreliable narrator.
Well, that was, yeah. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, I was just saying it's quite funny that he's constantly being contradicted from his own stories. It's like
that was obvious on the first day that he was telling me on camera things that were different or contradictory to things that he'd previously told me about his life in conversation or that I'd read in books. And so on that first day, I realised that the first day of filming was at Six Music. So that's the bit when we're in the studio with Mark Riley and the bit when we're in the canteen sort of cabin place outside. And I realised twice in those bits, I said, well, we're going to check this. We can ask them. And then we realised at the end of that day, me and Michael, that there could be a running theme about the unreliability of the story, which is a great thing to introduce into the idea of the documentary, the idea that you weren't really certain and no one could remember anyway. And then I knew we could find Steve Beresford, who Rob had said he had heckled, because I'd just worked with him on this John Cage tour. And I knew we could find Frank Skinner, who Rob said was in the band and then said wasn't in the band, because obviously I know him from doing the comedy circuit in the 90s. So that was just great, and that started to become a runner. And then, of course, right at the last minute, in what was clearly evolving into being the last scene of the film, which I'd had in my mind when I first had the idea of the plot line, the going to see the King Kong, and Michael had covered it really beautifully and got our one drone shot in. And then just in what I thought was the home 30 seconds of what I thought this would be the end of the film, Rob just started going on about having a shower with Robin Asquith. And I thought, oh, bollocks. As he was we're going to have to go and find Robin Asquith now. But A, that's really weird. And B, it won't quite land at this point.
But you flew to Malta.
No, we couldn't afford that. No, we couldn't afford that. We on the way home from the Penrith, Michael realised he knew someone who knew Robin Asquith, and I found him on the internet and sent him an email and said, would you record yourself doing a speech about all the people you've had a shower with? And he went, yeah, fine. And it helped that he knew me, and I knew he knew me because he'd been doing impressions of me on stage or something. Someone told me in his talks that he does about his life, and it was great what he shot because his friend shot it for him over there, and he shot a load of great landscape shots of Malta as well, which dropped really great in. And initially, when it was being edited, I thought, well, if this really breaks the pacing in what's clearly the build up to the climatic line, to suddenly go to Robin Asquith in Malta talking about showering with loads of people. But actually, the fact that it nearly just messed itself up right at the end as well, and that it's him doing it, I really liked that about it. And he's almost like this trump card when you think it's sort of finished and you've had all these weird celebrity cameos, and you're obviously, if you know anything about storytelling, you can feel that you're in the end of the home straight.
Yeah.
And suddenly you go to Malta. I love it when he says, I've swum in a fish tank with Oliver Reed. It's so funny, all the things. It's really great. But what a great bloke. And he was a really good sport about it. And again, I'd love to have been able to show a bit of Queen Kong, the sort of weird ape sex comedy that he did. But first of all, we couldn't find out anyone who was prepared to admit that they owned the rights to it. And then we just couldn't clear it. But it's an interesting film. But at some point, Robin and I will do a night or maybe a little tour of screening it and talking about it. Because it's a really good fun event.
Yeah, I think James and Natalia asked me, do I know if I can do some digging as to who owns the film?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Right.
And I think Universal put a cease and desist on the film because of a likeness to King Kong.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, but it's on a DVD which I've got.
Oh,
which looks quasi-official, but I mean, the company is untraceable that put it out.
Yeah, we've often had situations like that where we want to screen things, but we just can't, or nobody knows who owns the rights, or the companies have dissolved and things like that. Yeah,
well, it came out about the same time as the Jeff Bridges film, didn't it? And of course, they had high hopes for that. In fact, there's a great film anecdote about it where, because Jeff Bridges and Jessica, whoever it was, they hated doing it and thought it was terrible, and it all went wrong. And Dino De Laurentiis turned up on set in the last couple of days of filming and said he was really excited about the sequel. And I think Jeff Bridges tore a strip off him. He didn't really want anything to do with it.
Were there any contributors you wanted to get who you couldn't get access to?
Yeah, Julie Christie. Just couldn't find her. She was in France and couldn't really communicate with her. She just wanted to see if she remembered Rob being our postman. The woman from EastEnders who goes, Ricky, who he said had dirty milk bottles.
Patsy Palmer
was prepared to do it for some sort of fee, basically. And she was in New York, but she does sort of, she's a DJ now, and I think she's from that generation. I don't really understand where everything's, I couldn't really figure out what's going on. So that was a shame. We'd like to talk to Pete Shelley from the Buzzcocks, because we were following a blind alley of a story that Pete Shelley had asked Rob to replace Howard Devoto in the Buzzcocks when Howard Devoto left. And I even got as far as contacting the Buzzcocks manager with a view towards trying to get the prefects to open for the Nightingales to open for the Buzzcocks at the Royal Albert Hall. And then obviously Pete Shelley died, so that didn't go anywhere. And also, it's really good that we didn't get them opening at the Royal Albert Hall, because realistically they never would play the Royal Albert Hall, and it would have been a sort of fake end to the film, whereas a fake triumph. Whereas actually the real triumph is a simpler one. It's that Rob is 61, is still doing what he wants, is still writing new material. There's an audience there, not a massive one, but so he sort of won a more realistic victory, which is a victory of self-respect and persistence and the freedom to do what he wants. And if we'd contrived this big finish, whether at the Royal Albert Hall, it would have really ruined it, because it would have suggested that success is only manageable by the size of audiences or the prestige of the venue. And it would have done the exact opposite of what the film started to be about, which was what is a victory, what is a definition of success, what is the point of a person's life, But yeah, them three. I would have liked to talk to Robert Wyatt. We had a great story about Robert Wyatt, but Rob, it's not very well really, and he was very helpful, but we couldn't get that. But actually, in a way, it was good, because what it didn't end up being was lots of celebrity talking heads. And in fact, the celebrities that were in it, most of them had never heard of the Nightingales. I didn't know why they were in the film, like Nigel Slater. He was fantastic. He had an amazing sense, Nigel Slater, the chef, that he was required to deliver some aggrieved speech, and he really did it really well. What a great sport.
Yeah, let's talk about Robert's amazing side careers, because he was a food critic, he made music videos, had a record label, almost a TV show,
Yeah.
and he's a very savvy gambler.
Yeah, well, there was more than that. I mean, they did a pilot of a sort of chat show with Ted Chippington that didn't happen. The sitcom should have happened. The video career, there was a even weirder story about it. That first of all, we couldn't afford to clear the video that it was about, as it belongs to Disney, I think. And then also that there was obviously Rob had been put in a weird position by some people that looked as if they were using the video for money laundering of some sort, and we had to get all the facts dead right if we were going to talk about that, and we just couldn't. So those were good, but in the middle period between the Nightingales stopping and starting again, he obviously had some pretty big problems. I'm not a journalist, and if the film's got a fault, it's that I should have run those problems down and made more of them. As it is, I just couldn't do that because I'm not that sort of person, and I wouldn't like those things to be on screen about me. But on the other hand, I had agreed to make this film, so Michael had a really good idea of getting Rob to talk to Louis, his son, about that period in the pub where he lived when Louis used to visit him after he got divorced. And I think that conversation gives you as much as you need to know and does it much better than I would have done. But again, in that bit, Rob's very aware when I've got him standing outside the Chinese takeaway that he lived at. He's aware that I'm looking for the fourth act. I'm looking for the miserable bit before the return. Before I'm looking for the hero's journey bit where it goes wrong. Before he,
yeah,
and he's very great. Even then, he was annoyed with me for asking him difficult questions. He was going, "Oh, you know what Stewart Lee is like? He's trying to contrive some "oh, woe is me" bit to make out that I was having a bad time." So he sees what I'm trying to do and attacks it. And it's really great that you've got this documentary about someone who said they wanted a documentary to be made. And then when they realised it meant they would have to talk and be interviewed and be followed around, they didn't really like it. And they're trying to sort of sabotage it at the same time as being in it. That's why so many of the interviews are in pubs and Indian restaurants and things, because you had to catch him on the hoof in a place that he was happy to be anyway, as if you were just there. But once they became, you couldn't do interviews. And when we tried to film interviews in front of audiences, when we did little screenings of 20-minute excerpts or whatever, which I thought would be good for the film, Rob just hated it so much, having to talk about himself, that they were unusable. So that's why it is that it is. But then it's nice that it's got the feeling of overheard conversations rather than staged interviews.
There's a really tender scene where you're talking with him on the couch about his career, where he gets quite melancholic about his position in the music business, being dropped by labels, and he kind of reaches that point which so many creatives I know, I personally have had it, where you just wonder, why the fuck am I bothering?
Yeah.
Or putting myself through this? Like, no one's forcing me to.
Yeah.
But then also on the flip side, what else are you going to do with your life?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know what? Simon Munnery's got a joke that all biographies are really about the writer of the biography, and you impose your own life onto someone else's. And I've certainly had that as well, between about 2000 and 2005. And so, yeah, I think you look for that. I mean, that scene, again, it came out, that was so weird. Like, we never knew what he was going to tell us next. And we were at his house because I wanted to film the garden and his daily pill routine and him cooking his vegetables and everything. And then he just started rambling on the sofa, and when I better put the camera on, he suddenly remembered that in a box in that room, he'd got an audio cassette of demos for a second solo album. And no one even knew these existed. I never heard anything about it. I go, "You've got demos for a second album?" He goes, "Oh, yeah, I think so." but he accidentally taped over some of it, and then he put this song on that's in the film, the one that sounds like a Scott Walker song. And we were going, what else have you got? You've just never mentioned it, you know. And then he started getting quite moody, and that's the only bit really where we've got that. And it was, you can see that it wasn't planned because he's sitting in front of a clothes horse. Did you notice that? Just
I like
behind
that touch. Yeah, that grounded it so well.
Just where he was, you know. And I looked a particular mess that day. I didn't know we were going to be doing that, but yeah, that just came out really well, you know. And a journalist with more of a killer instinct would have contrived those things, but on the other hand, you know, it's come out a really happy film, and I think loads of people have really enjoyed it at this time, you know, to see some people being nice to each other and having fun and walking around outside and going in pubs and crowded gigs and things.
What was the biggest challenge you faced in making the film? Can you think of one example?
Well, clearing, we were really worried initially that we'd never have the money to clear what we would need in terms of music and film. There's a lot of the Nightingales music they don't own. As it happened, it became clear really quickly that it was never going to be a film that was going to make the case for the music, because you're starting from nothing. You know, no one knows who they are. You have to remember that. Most, even people that you'd think would know who they are, that like The Fall or the Gang of Four or something, who you'd think would have heard of them, haven't. So it had to be a human story about this guy. And once we realised that, that meant the problems with not being able to clear a lot of the music were much easier. We didn't want to overload it with it anyway. It's there for people to find now if they want, which they are doing. Another problem was that we didn't quite know if we'd get enough out of Rob. At the start, he, having asked for it to be made, he didn't really seem to want to talk, you know. But I've since read interviews with him where he said he realised about halfway through that he was just going to have to be himself and not try and pretend to be anyone else. And he said that's what Nick Cave would do, or Mark Smith. They would try and do a pose of someone. And he said, I am an unctuous buffoon and I should come across as one. So once he realised, he was all right about it. But actually, I know that Michael, we couldn't have afforded an editor or an edit suite. And Michael did it, you know, on his software in his shed. And I know that it was a huge challenge for him initially, because he'd not edited anything. And when he did edit stuff at film school, it was when it was still analog and you were cutting the film and sticking it together. But he really got to grips with that. In terms of man hours on the film, Michael certainly did the most because he spent weeks in that shed editing it while I had thoughts, which were much easier to have. So that probably it. But actually, it's such an interesting bloke, Rob. All the locations were good. I thought it would be all right. And I'll tell you when I thought it was going to be good. It was about halfway through when we interviewed Frank Skinner at the Moth Club in Hackney. And Frank said, I'd already thought I wanted to film him on stage with the Nightingales, so it looked like what it would have looked like if he'd stayed with them. But Frank said, I suppose all cult figures wish they had mainstream success, and everyone with mainstream success wishes they were a cult figure. And when he said that sentence, I thought, you legend, you know, that's great, because that's the axis that this film turns on, really. And I was just hoping someone, not me, would say it. And he said it so perfectly. I thought, well, that's in the bag. That's fine. We'll be able to do this now because there's that little axis of an idea for it to turn on. But mainly it was just really great fun. I know. I mean, me and Michael both liked the group when we were teenagers. Michael sent 3 proposals to the BBC 31 years ago for documentaries. He said he wanted to make a documentary about the Nightingales and Ted Chippington and Jake Thackeray. And he's sort of got to do 2 of those. They wouldn't have made them 31 years ago and they wouldn't make them now, but he's got to make 2 of them in one with this. So that was great. And it was really good fun being around with them. I loved going to all the places. I liked eating the grey peas in the Great Western Pub, Wolverhampton, and going to all these curry places that Rob knows about in Birmingham. And I loved going up on the Stone Circle and being at all the gigs. And I loved meeting all the people, and having a reason to meet them that wasn't like you were a pest, like you were a fan pest, And it was really great hearing someone like Tank, who's been in the Membranes and the Nightingales, and is a hired gun for so many people. Talking to a guy like that about 40 years in rock and roll as a sort of workhorse and what that's like. Yeah, it's brilliant. And everyone was so nice to us as well. I mean, we turn up places and tell people what they were doing. Like the landlady at that pub, the Eagle in Borsall Heath, she didn't know anything about who we were, and people were really friendly and helpful everywhere we went. It was great.
The film features lots of great British eccentrics like Ted Chippington, Steve Wells, Steve Beresford.
Yeah.
What draws you to those type of characters?
Well, I don't think they're just the things that I like. And, some people that are like that become popular. Like Harry Hill, for example, people don't really notice. They've sort of forgotten how strange his act is. And yet he's a household name. And actually, when mums and dads and kids do go to see him live because they've enjoyed his television comedy review programs, they often find themselves watching a grown man splashing about in a paddling pool on stage while throwing bread at the audience and wonder why they don't always really like it. So, I mean, it's not because they're unknown. I like things that are known as well. But, a lot of the good stuff just... And when you see these lists of like the 50 greatest comedians, if Kitson isn't in it and Simon Munnery isn't in it, you just think, well, what's the point really? It's about who's been noticed rather than anything else, But they got good stories to tell as well. I think the fact that Rob hasn't made it in a conventional sense means he's relatable. There seems to be a lot of goodwill towards him as a result of the film. But I don't know. I mean, you said you've seen yourself. You've seen me at a lot of the same gigs as you go to. But when the people, I mean, you're wearing a Tortoise t-shirt. I saw their first British gig, which was at a little pub in Camden. And they were on with Smog, and they were supposed to be on with 11th Dream Day. That's why I went, because they're this Chicago group that I love, but they never turned up because their kid was ill. And so I watched Tortoise, and they did that Gamera thing, the thing's a 12-inch, the first one they put out. And it's one of the most fantastic things I've ever seen live. And I saw them not knowing who they were. It's in the back of a pub opposite that factory with the black cats outside it.
Was it Dublin Castle
bar,
or Enterprise?
No, not none of them. Although, but it was amazing. And but I'd be happy to go and see them at the Roundhouse as well. I don't think it's a shame they're known now. But it just seems to be. Also, I don't think Rob isn't trying to write uncommercial songs. In his mind, he's writing hits. He's not trying to be difficult. He'd really like to be a success. That's just the way they're wired, isn't it?
I saw something interesting recently. I watched new documentaries. I watched the Frank Zappa documentary, and I watched Julian Temple's documentary on the Pogues.
What's that like?
I liked it, but there's two things that really weirded me out by the film. One, Johnny Depp speaking to Shane in a pub, and he's putting on an Irish accent throughout, which is really strange. And I'm really surprised Shane didn't call him on it.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Some of the best actors are like ciphers, aren't they? Maybe Johnny Depp doesn't really know who he is and who he is himself, and just kind of slips into
They say that a lot of the best actors are quite, maybe bland's the wrong word, but just quite neutral and can morph into other people.
yeah. De Niro seems like that. What I found doing this film was I've not lived in the Midlands for 33 years, but I found my accent would get stronger and stronger the more time I spent there, as if I was reverting back to my actual real self rather than a metropolitan liberal elitist trying to have a neutral accent so that you didn't look like a regional comedian. But it was great. It was great being around with it. So the Julian Temple one and the other one, the Frank Zappa one. Yeah, I mean that's a long time brewing, isn't it? What's the thrust of that one?
That one is really good. It's the first time it's been approved by the family.
Right.
There's a big, horrible legal battle going on with Dweezil, who takes his dad's music on tour, playing the music of Zappa.
Yeah.
And for some reason, his mum's trying to hit him with a cease and desist for performing the music. But the thing with the Pogues documentary is every time they'd set up, oh, I went to the studio, I recorded A Rainy Night in Soho or Fairy Tale in New York, they just skip over it. And me watching so many music documentaries, I think I'm a sucker for that classic songwriting moment where you know it's coming, where they say, I was in the studio late at night, the band had left, I just took out my guitar and a pen and I...
Yeah, well, that's a difficult thing then, because obviously both those artists are people that they have known songs and they have songs that really connect with people. And when you watch those documentaries about them, you're thinking, oh, I hope they talk about how they wrote this.
Yeah.
But with the Nightingales, there isn't that expectation at all. There's not a point where, for a tiny minority of people might be thinking, I wonder how they wrote Start From Scratch or Urban Ospreys or something, but they're not part of the tapestry of most people's lives. So you were kind of relieved of having to do that, and I was glad in a way, because I was more interested in. I mean, I love the music and I'm really interested in it, but I thought for most people they'd be more interested in a relatable story of some people. But I mean, the actual story behind the composition of the Christa Pogue's Christmas song is so interesting. Did they touch on that at all? Because Jem Finer's partner wrote the initial draft of it.
Julian Temple says he swerved, or he hates those classic tropes and those moments where you're tugging on the heartstrings or slowly fading up the chorus as they have the eureka moment.
Yeah.
He's kind of spent all his life kind of messing with rockumentary formula, so he says he just would never...
He did a documentary of the comic strip in its really early days, which is live, which is an extra on the box set of all the comic strip films.
I've seen that. That's really good.
It is good, but I kind of think it's a shame he didn't just film a normal night, because there's so little documentation of that area, and then he keeps cutting away to people that have been put in special costumes, and it's kind of it's a different thing. There's no. It's a shame there's not an actual bit of film of what it was really like.
Yeah, I'm kind of obsessed with Mr. Jolly Lives Next Door. I need to watch that once every year. Talk to me. What was the dynamic like with Michael working on the film? I'm always interested in.
Well, it was no trouble
duos.
At all, right? It was no trouble at all. I had it in my head that I would sort of be in it, because I was thinking of it as those sort of documentaries where a person finds a story as they go along. But I didn't want it to be one of these celebrity things like they have on the BBC, where whoever they could get goes on a journey, blah, 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 blah. It wasn't going to be like that. But I tried to write the opening minute as if it felt like it was going to be one of those. And then it really quickly isn't, in the first couple of days, I realised we'd never really talked about this, and Michael didn't know, was surprised that I sort of thought I was going to be in it, because he was thinking of it in a slightly different way. But we sort of thrashed that out, and what all that meant is that we had to make sure we had an extra camera on all the interviews while we decided whether I'd be in it or not, really. Then there was a couple of things that he wanted to do that I didn't understand. Like, I didn't really understand what he wanted to do with Gale's doc, which is the piece at the end where Samir Ahmed narrates it. Because to me, it felt like it would seem really staged. But actually, that's the beauty of it. And Michael was very into the Anthony Ward's Arena documentaries, which have quite staged bits in them, which act as commentary on the real stuff. And of course, it worked really, really well. I didn't not want to do it, but I just didn't understand what it would be. Likewise, he said he didn't really understand why I wanted to take Rob to the Stone Circle. But when we got there, it was pretty obvious what that was about and how it was going to work. And we were so lucky that it snowed, as it looked great. So there were a couple of things, but the thing is, we both know that each other are good in our respective fields. So you just try to support the idea rather than block it, and then be really pleased when it turned out to be a good idea anyway. So I've never really worked like that with anyone before. So there was absolutely no problem. And then when it got to the edit, Michael was doing all the hard work of trying to assemble it kind of chronologically and thematically, but I'd always had this story idea in my head. And so we would just sort of swap notes about how he could get what he wanted out of it, and I could get the sort of drive of the story out of it. And there were never even really any compromises. There was simply, we'd talk about it until we realised what was the right thing to do, even if it wasn't what you thought it was originally. Partly why it was so easy was because there was no executive producer. No one was paying for it. So normally you're fighting a three-way battle against a person whose interest is financial or commercial. You know, they want you to do certain things because they think that means it will sell or play well. But we didn't have that. We only had ourselves. So it was really great. And the tragic thing is that, you know, we will go back to working for people again. We're working for people. I mean, I'm probably not as dependent on it as Michael, because obviously I am a live performer principally. But normally, if you want to make something on film, you have to answer to the person who's paying the piper, you know. And it'll be very hard to ever do that again, having been able to make what you wanted without interference. And all we got from our producer, James, was support and practical advice. And I think it's because at Fire, he's used to managing the sort of 20-year careers of these people like Bardo Pond or the Bevis Frond or the Chills, that they just carry on, you know.
Yeah.
He's not looking for like a quick, he doesn't mind if they have a hit, great, but he's sort of used to just supporting these people in what they want to do long term. And the audience come back every year and, you know, it just keeps rolling along. So it was a really great kind of fit to be with someone who's prepared to release records by the Bardo Pond. Like Bardo Pond and the Bevis Frond is probably a better producer for a film of the sort we wanted to make than someone who's looking for a hit, you know. But actually, of course, the irony is it has been a hit. It's been a demonstrable hit. And it's sad. I mean, so lots of things are sad at the moment. One of the sad things is we've not been able to get together with the group and the people that worked on it and buy them all a drink, because it's succeeded beyond what anyone could have dreamt of, you know.
I read something funny recently. I was reading about the film Performance, you know, the Nicholas Roeg, Donald Cammell film. Yeah. And they were shooting really quickly. So Warner Brothers were like, wow, this duo directing combo is going to be the future. Donald works with the actors. Nicholas works on the production side with the cameras. And everything's getting done so quickly. And then obviously they saw the finished product and they were like, what the fuck is with all this Aleister Crowley occult imagery and violence and sex and hallucinogenics? And they were like, yeah, this is not going to happen again.
Yeah. Well, you know, this would never have got made. And it's really sad. And it was, you know, it was very quickly turned down by a lot of people we approached. And that's with both me and Michael having BAFTAs and British Comedy Awards. You know, it doesn't count for anything. And I mean, it was rejected by one broadcast just on the base of it didn't really fit the algorithm that would suggest that anyone would watch it. And of course it wouldn't, because the Nightingales don't show up on any algorithm generator. But at some point, culture has to reach beyond its containing perimeter wall and find a new story. And that's how you get things like the remake of the Kevin Spacey political drama that was on Netflix. It was a British thing, Andrew Davis thing, first of all, whose name I've forgotten.
House of Cards.
House of Cards, yeah. I mean, Netflix, when it started to make its own drama, it did a survey. Who's your favourite actor? Kevin Spacey. What's your favourite serious drama? House of Cards. Right, well, we'll remake House of Cards of Kevin Spacey. Bang. It's just like a mathematical formula. But there was no question being asked by broadcasters or content platforms for which the answer is a Nightingales documentary fronted by Stewart Lee. So, it's not going to happen. We couldn't assume anyone was interested in the Nightingales. Well, I've looked at the comments online about it, which I enjoy, and one of them was, I don't like Stewart Lee and I hate this music, but I really enjoyed this film. So I don't think you can hope for more than that, really.
How do you do that to yourself?
You have to just treat it as weird kind of market research and, laugh at the bad ones. And but I mean, there's been some enjoyable things. There was someone was saying, why had I done this and why had I put it on Sky? And they hoped that it helped me. That I presumably was doing it because I wanted a new extension to my house. And the idea of the gulf between that and the fact we've earned literally nothing from it. Did it at our own expense. And also how naive people to think, who's thinking, I know, I'll make hundreds of thousands of pounds by making a documentary about unknown Birmingham group, the Nightingales. So yeah, it's
that's the worst get rich plan.
Yeah, the worst get. It's been really great, and I mean, it came along. It's been a miserable year for everyone. Obviously, as a champagne socialist, I escaped the worst of it. Although I haven't really been able to work for a year, and it'll be a year before I do probably. But and no one's in my immediate family has died, But it's pretty relentless, isn't it? And then I've very privileged to have this morale boost come at what's probably going to be the midpoint of this crisis. It was good to be occupied again, to have to engage your brain to talk about it and to be able to see that it will have a future, and then that means you've got a future and there is a future, and it sort of was like a real blessing in the end. Weird. It was never a chore, but it's actually turned out to be a lifeline. Didn't anticipate that.
And final question, what did Robert think of the film?
Well, he likes it more and more as the days go by, from what I can tell. I think he found it pretty bruising to be talked about. But he trusted us, which was great to be trusted by someone. On paper, it's worked out really well for them. It's done what he wanted it to do, which is to raise their profile a bit. The ball's in his court now. If he gets to do 1,000-seater in London rather than a 150-seater when the next tour off the back of this, it'd be difficult for him to manage expectations of people. It's hard to deliver when you're suddenly thrust into a spotlight. It'd be interesting to see what they do with it all. So we've done what we set out to do, which is to make an interesting film about the Nightingales, and I think he comes out of it really well. So, it's pretty good. I think he's all right about it. I mean, everyone did their best.
That's all you can ask for.
Yeah.